In a complete 180 from early on in the season, the Kraken continue this recent trend of getting off to strong starts in games. But you know what they say, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. Though the Kraken actually finished off this game pretty well on top of that. The problem was that bit in the middle there. What's cracking, everybody, and welcome back to Kraken R&R, where, yes, in spite of a strong start, the Seattle Kraken do end up falling to the Minnesota Wild 6-3, ending their 3-game winning streak. And since this first ever appearance by the Kraken in Minnesota does come as the first half of a back-to-back with the Kraken playing tomorrow in Dallas, or again today as of when you're watching this, we'll just jump right into it. Early on, it is a pretty even back and forth game between the two teams, with Minnesota in particular playing strong defense, shutting down the Kraken attack, and not allowing them to get a shot on goal. Though eventually, like I said in the beginning, it is Seattle who gets off to the stronger start, as Fleury behind the net passes the puck out to Donskoy at the corner, who gets it out in front to Sprong with his strong shot. He's able to put it into the back of the net and give the Kraken the 1-0 lead. Of course, that having been said, Sprong didn't really need to use the strong shot that he does have, because the Fleury that was behind the net passing it to Donskoy in the corner was Marc-Andre Fleury, the goaltender for the Wild. So the miscue between Fleury behind his own net and his own defenseman allows Donskoy to get the pass, putting it out in front for Sprong, who then has an empty net to put it into, giving the Kraken that early lead. And for Fleury, yeah, that's a dang it. Yeah, swing and a miss. Sorry, the Beniers just finished off a win against the Royals, so at least one of the Seattle teams won tonight. Getting back to the Kraken, though, not long after they get that 1-0 lead, having traded some quick opportunities with the Wild, it's a rush chance that McCann sets Kuhlman loose on. It's a 2-on-1 with Gord on the other side, and Kuhlman sends it over to Gord, who sends it back to Kuhlman, who sends it back to Gord, who sends it into the back of the net to give the Kraken the 2-0 lead, less than halfway through the first period. Okay, so technically speaking, the goal did happen 20 seconds after the halfway mark of the first period, but either way, it's a very good start to the Kraken against another pretty good team here on the road. Unfortunately, it's at this point that I decided to send out what turns out to be rather poorly timed tweet about how Kraken fans looking forward to who the Kraken could end up picking up in free agency should be keeping their eye on Kevin Fiala, as with the cap issues that the Wild are going to have going into next season, even if they would like to keep him, it's going to be pretty difficult for them to do so. At which point, whether it was him trying to start an addition for the Kraken or just trying to convince the Wild that they need to do whatever they possibly can to keep him, he decided to start taking over the game. And that Fiala takeover starts when the Wild get a power play late in the first, and while the Kraken do a pretty good job of killing this power play off early on, and really until the last final seconds, it's in those final seconds that Fiala gets it down to Kaprizov, who gets it quickly up to Eriksson Ek, who quickly gets the shot off and finds the back of the net. It's a tic-tac-toe play and a power play goal for the Wild to cut the Kraken lead in half, with the Kraken still holding on to a 2-1 lead, which they would be able to maintain into the first intermission. You know what though, even in spite of that late power play goal by the Wild, it was a pretty good first period by the Kraken, who held their own and even come out with a lead at the end of one against a very good team on the road, starting off this back-to-back and the road trip. Plus again, like I mentioned earlier, continuing this trend of starting off games strong, something that we really weren't seeing a lot at the start of the season, and we talked about in the last one being important going forward. However, that's when the second period starts, and yeah, oh boy. I mean, honestly, there's just no way to sugarcoat this. This second period turns out to be, I think, pretty easily the worst single period the Kraken have had all season long, and hopefully have for a very, very long time to come. It all starts 2 minutes into the second when the Wild get a rush chance and the Kraken defensively completely break down, forgetting entirely about Eriksson Ek going down the backside, with 4 Kraken players crowding around Fiala, who, to be fair, does have quite a game, so he warrants some attention, but at least one of these Kraken defenders has to go over to cover Eriksson Ek. I'm not going to put it too much on Donato or Beniers, who are both on Fiala, but one of Susi or Alexiak has to be over on the other side. Instead, Eriksson Ek is left all alone on the other side of the goal. Fiala gets it through the 4 Kraken players over to Eriksson Ek, who's able to beat Grubauer and give the Wild that second goal of the game, tying things up at 2. As we go on through the second period, it's going to become pretty clear that this is not a good period to be Philip Grubauer. But with that having been said, and while he does eventually contribute to that, this is a tough one to put on him, as it's really just the defense completely forgetting about a guy on the backside of the goal who's able to get the crossing pass clean and get the shot off that he of course scores on. A few minutes later, it's the Wild getting their second power play of the game, and once again, it's Fiala with the puck, Up near the blue line, he throws it down next to the net where there's an unmarked, wide open Kaprizov standing right next to it. And look, I get that it's a power play and you're down a man by the nature of the power play, but if there's one guy on the Wild that you probably want to have a guy on no matter what, it's Kaprizov. Either way, he's allowed to stand right next to the net without anybody challenging him, and he tips this shot from Fiala into the top corner of the net to give the Wild the now 3-2 lead. And for those keeping track, yes, at this point, Fiala does have an assist on all 3 Wild goals, and a primary assist on 2 of them. And again on this one, really not much more Grubauer could have done about it. It's just a nice tip in by Kaprizov, who again probably should have been defended. 3.5 minutes later though, when Hartman skates into the offensive zone and fires off a shot on net that beats Grubauer clean, that one probably should have been stopped by Grubauer. In fact, I'll say definitely should have been stopped by Grubauer. It's a soft one that he lets up here, and it's now a 4-2 lead for the Wild. Also worth mentioning on this goal, while Fiala isn't a part of it, Kaprizov is getting his 3rd point of the game and becoming the first player in Minnesota Wild history to reach 100 points in a season. And also the second opposing player to reach that milestone already this season against the Kraken, with Johnny Gaudreau having done it earlier this month. And then, to make matters even worse for the Kraken, not long after this 4th goal and 3rd of the period for the Wild, they get another power play, and once again, after having been 2 for 2 on the night, it does not take them long to make it 3 for 3. It's Kaprizov up to Fiala, down to Zuccarello, and into the back of the net to get that 4th goal of the period and a now 5-2 lead for the Wild, their 3rd power play goal of the night. As far as the Kraken penalty kill is concerned, much like the first one, this is just a nice play by the Wild that gets the puck into the back of the net, and for Grubauer specifically, he really did do all he could to try and stop this one, getting over with his arm and pad, but the puck just barely finds the gap between them, squeaking through into the back of the net, and that's just the kind of thing that's going to happen. There's only so much net that Grubauer was going to be able to cover, and the puck managed to find one of the gaps to get into it. And finally, not even 2.5 minutes after this 3rd power play goal and 4th goal for the Wild of the period, still at 5-on-5 at this point, it's Fiala up to Delorier, who crashes the net, throws the puck on net. Grubauer comes up with the save, but the puck bounces out in front of the net where Delorier is able to pick it up and put it into the net past Grubauer to give the Wild their 5th goal of the period with still 6 minutes or 5.5 minutes left in it. It's now a 6-2 lead for the Wild, and yeah, this game got out of hand pretty quick. I mean, yeah, this did really escalate quickly, or I guess for the Kraken, de-escalate. Does that make sense? I don't know. Point is, it's not going well. And for Fiala alone, future Kraken pickup in free agency in this 2022 offseason, you know, we're just being hopeful at this point. It's not like anything else is going the Kraken way, so what the heck, why not? For him, it's his 4th assist of the period, all 4 primary assists, and his 5th point of the game. And mercifully, that's where the Wild onslaught would eventually stop, with the score now 6-2, and in the end, 5 goals being scored in the 2nd period alone by Minnesota. 5. 5 goals in 1 period. Oh boy. So yeah, at this point the game is pretty much over for the Kraken. There's virtually no way they can possibly come back from a 4-goal deficit in the 3rd period, especially against a team as good as the Wild are this season. And so, with that being the case, that leaves pretty much just one order of business left for the Kraken to hopefully find a way to attend to before this game does eventually end. And they get a chance to do that here early in the 3rd with a power play, though the power play really goes pretty much nowhere for the Kraken, only getting 1 shot off on goal, killed off by the Wild with almost no trouble. Fortunately, they do get a 2nd chance on the power play just a couple minutes later, and about halfway through that power play, done after the Kraken passing the puck slowly around the outside like they like to do on the power play, it's Dunn who does take the shot from right down the middle. Fleury does make the save, but it comes right out to a wide open Beniers, who buries the shot and gives the Kraken their 3rd goal of the game. It's just 6-3, which, you know, it's not super exciting to still be down 6-3 at this point, but it is exciting when it's Matty Beniers who puts it into the back of the net. His 3rd goal already for the Kraken, and his 5th point in 5 games, still a point per game player, and a 5-game point streak to start out his career. And also with that 3rd goal of the season, 3rd goal in 5 games, and 3rd goal in the career for Matty Beniers, he also passes 6 Kraken players on the all-time goal-scoring list for the franchise, including Jonas Donskoy and Riley Sheahan, both of whom have played over 60 games for the team. Which is not meant to rub it in for specifically Donskoy, who again has had a rough season, especially luck-wise through the start and middle of the year. And for the Kraken, with that taken care of, they can just let the rest of this game end and move on to the next one in Dallas. They do eventually kill off 2 power plays successfully with the rest of this 3rd period, no more scoring happens, and of course the game does end 6-3 like you saw in the beginning. As for my 3 takeaways from this game, 2 of them are going to be a little bit more Wild centric, though one of them still relates to the Kraken, which is somewhat abnormal to how I tend to do this, but considering how this game went, I think that's fair enough. As for the one that relates solely to the Kraken, I think it's pretty obvious the big thing for Seattle here is to play a full 60 minutes. It's something that we've seen be a problem for the Kraken plenty of times throughout the course of this season, but maybe not quite as glaringly obvious as it was in this game, where the Kraken again play a strong first period and a pretty good third period, but just absolutely fall completely apart throughout the entire second. Quite frankly, they looked like 2 completely different Kraken teams, the one that we saw in the first and third period and the one that we saw in the second. As far as Kraken fans are concerned, we definitely want to be seeing a lot more of that team that played the first and third periods of this game and the entire homestand before it, rather than that second period team that looked like the worst version of the Coyotes and Habs that we've seen all season. Or even the Sabres from last year for that matter. As for the second takeaway from this game, Wild fans, and really anybody that's watched any more of the Wild than the 2 games they've played previously against the Kraken, is already very well aware of this fact, but this is nowhere near the same Wild team that people have watched over the last, history of their franchise. This Wild team is very exciting to watch. The Wild do have a bit of a reputation of being a boring, low event, not very interesting team that just flames out in the playoffs, but this Wild team, at least as far as the regular season is concerned so far, has been nothing but the opposite. Incredibly fun to watch, especially with Kaprizov, Boldy, and Fiala leading the way scoring-wise. Good on the defensive end, and everyone likes to watch Marc-Andre Fleury since he's joined the team especially, and that could make for a pretty exciting playoff run, assuming they can get past the Blues in the first round. Either way, even if they don't, it should be a fun series to watch, which is not necessarily something that we've been able to say about watching Wild playoff series in the past. And at least as far as I'm concerned anyway, I think that that's absolutely fantastic. Minnesota in particular, of anywhere in the United States, definitely deserves to have an exciting NHL team to watch, and one that can make those deep playoff runs, and eventually, hopefully here in the near future, win them a Stanley Cup. Of course, with that having been said, as we get to the third takeaway from this game, as Wild fans once again are well aware, this is probably the best year for them to try to make that deep run and try to win that Stanley Cup. Because starting next season, they have a lot of cap space that's going to go missing to the buyouts of Parise and Suter from this previous offseason. And when you throw in on top of that they don't have a lot of contracts coming off of the books in this offseason, it really limits their possibilities when trying to re-sign guys like Kevin Fiala. Now, especially considering the season Fiala has had for the Wild, getting points 78 through 82 tonight against the Kraken, guaranteeing that he'll be at least a point per game player by the end of the season, you gotta have to believe that the Wild are going to try to do everything they can to get him back on the roster for next season. Again, there's still somewhat limited options for them to be able to do that. The only big contract that they have coming off of the books in order to try to make that happen, though, would be that of Marc-Andre Fleury, which is only $3.5 million. Of course, they also have the $5 million of Fiala's current contract that will come off, but assuming he tries to get as much money as he can, trying to look for somewhere in the range of probably not $10 million, but somewhere in the range of $8 million per year, it could be a pretty tough one for the Wild to fit in. Of course, it is worth mentioning that Fiala is set to be an RFA, not a UFA, which gives the Wild a little bit more control when trying to keep him, even if other teams do start making offers. But still, it could be a tough one for them to figure out. And if they can't figure out a way to keep him, and he does end up leaving Minnesota, then to answer a question that I got in the last R&R against the Avalanche, yes, I would be all too happy to see Fiala join the Kraken next season and play in Seattle. And finally, as has become the new norm, to wrap things up, the Kraken 3 stars of the game, where with a game like this, unlike some of the previous ones, it is a little bit more difficult to determine 3 guys worthy of getting stars, but I still think there were some guys that had decent games for the Kraken, even in spite of how the second period went. So in the end, I am going to end up giving that first star to Matty Beniers. I mean, how could I not give it to him? He has a point in each of his first 5 NHL games, with 3 goals and 2 assists, and 2 of those goals coming on the power play, which normally would seem like that's just an easier way to score goals. But as we've seen with the Kraken so far this season, so far, there's only like 4 games left, as we've seen with the Kraken this season in their power play, scoring goals on the power play is not necessarily an easy feat for them, at least until Beniers showed up. The second star I will give to the one of those 3 on the gourd line that I thought had the best overall game for the Kraken in this one, and that was Carson Kuhlman. I'm sure he was a little bit extra motivated returning back to his home state, But either way, a great game for him, both offensively and defensively. He had a couple of very nice steals on the back check in the defensive end. And then, of course, a couple of nice rushes, including the one that got him that assist on the tic-tac-toe between the two of them, him and Gord, that ended up finishing off with the Gord goal. As for Gord, well, if there were 4 stars, I'd probably give the 4th one to him. And I think you could make a pretty good argument for making him either the 2nd or 3rd star here. Instead, I'm going to end up giving the 3rd star to a guy that, to be honest, I've kind of snubbed for a few games in a row. He's been always one of those kind of honorable mention guys over these last few games, but it is high time that he ended up getting into the stars, and that's Vince Dunn. Again, another really good complete game from Dunn, especially considering how this game went for the team as a whole. He plays both well on the offensive and defensive end, dishing well on the power play, and again, this has something to do with just rewarding him for really a strong month of April, where he's always been a good play driver for the Kraken on the offensive end, but his defense has sometimes left a little bit to be desired, with oftentimes it seeming like he tries to do a little bit too much to make up for the deficiencies of the Kraken scoring-wise. And a lot of the time, that does end up biting him defensively. However, he has been able to kind of clean that up here over the last few weeks, and it's time that was rewarded. You know, as much as some random guy on the internet can reward him. And even with this being a much less fun game, especially for us Kraken fans, than the last few have been, I'd still love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section on this game, who your 3 stars of the game would be, and what your main takeaways would be, whether or not you'd like to see Fiala, and what the contract you think Fiala ends up getting might look like. Otherwise, if you have made it to this point, thank you very much for watching. If you did like or enjoy this video, there are buttons for that kind of stuff down below that help support the channel, so I'd appreciate you using them. And until next time, be good to each other, God bless, and go Kraken.